Hi, I'd like to take a few minutes out and take a look at what is TSI as far as the federal ESSA identification is concerned. So I'm going to go and share with you a brief slideshow that gets into exactly what is TSI. So first of all, you need to understand that TSI represents Targeted Support and Improvement, which is an identification level in the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. This requires that the data that typically is collected by the state is used to identify schools that are in need of improvement. So this is a difference between what the federal program is about and what the state program is about as far as accountability. There are three categories, and TSI is one of the three identification categories. So we're going to take a closer look at TSI right now. There are 5 factors that influence the scores that students get. Remember that ESSA is a ranking system. And so every school gets a rank based on a number of scores. The first number of points that it gets from these scores. First is achievements, points-based proficiency score. Second is student growth percentile. Third is how well are we doing with our English language learners. The fourth is the graduation rate, if it's appropriate for your school. And the fifth is absenteeism, whether it's chronic or not. Let's take a look at how the selection or the identification process goes for TSI. First of all, you need to understand that it's a ranking of specific student groups. So what are the groups that we're looking at? We're looking at the typical ones that we have continued to work with since No Child Left Behind. So Asian, Black, Latinx, Native American, Pacific Islander, white, 2 or more races, or service provision. In other words, economically disadvantaged students, students with an IEP, or 504, and English language learners. Now, when we look at the scores from each one of those groups, each and every group, here's what happens with TSI. First of all, you earn, or a school earns, points based on the performance of academics, attendance, all those 5 indicators that we just looked at. Those points are associated with a specific group, whether it's a race, ethnic group, or service provision, and each one of them is given a score. Schools are then ranked within like groups. So if you're an elementary school or a high school, you'll be ranked with those from similar groups, from lowest to highest. And this is based on the state of Wisconsin. So we'll be looking at the highest scoring school in Wisconsin to the lowest. From there, TSI is the bottom 10% of schools are identified. So let's, for instance, say that the specific group we're looking at are students with disabilities, so students with an IEP. We add up the scores that are, the points that are available from all the different factors, the indicators, and the school is placed on a scale from the highest to the lowest, and depending upon where all other schools perform in the state, the bottom 10% are identified. This identification is an annual process, and it is only good for 1 year, as long as you raise the achievement of that particular group. Here's something that is very important for us in MMSD, test participation. Now, all federal expectations around assessment is that every student will test, period. However, penalties will not start until we get to below 95%. So essentially at 95% is when penalties start kicking in. What happens is the number of the points that you get are added up for each of the groups. And the federal government process uses zeros to bring your attendance up to your participation rate up to 90%. So let's take a look at that. Here's what's expected. So let's say this is the group of, you have a class of 100 students, 95 are the minimum number that is expected to test. Let's say that you have only 80 or 80% actually do test. What happens next is that 15% that remains will be given zeros. So you'll have 15 zeros to add into your total point value for the achievement, the academic achievement of this specific group that we're looking at. As we all know, zeros do amazingly harsh things to averages, but that's the way this particular process works. Another thing that's different is that absenteeism is defined as students who are missing 10% in the federal system versus 16% in the state system. Now, once you've been identified, how do you exit the status? There's a document that's available on the website called Understanding CSI, TSI, and ATSI Identifications in MMSD. This is an annual review for both exiting and being identified. So you can be identified in the same group if you were in that bottom 10% year after year. Now, what do you have to do? Once you've been identified, you must develop a school-level targeted support and improvement plan. In other words, a SIP for that group or that has triggered the identification. Not specifically for that, but they must be one of the foci of your school improvement plan. And in that, you need to identify what evidence-based strategy you're going to use with that group to move that group. You also will be including what are the resources, the resource inequities that you're going to be reviewing and taking a look at so that you can change the budgeting process and take a look at where is money spent and is it an equitable way of spending the money and providing support for these students. Finally, stakeholder involvement in planning is required. There is a rubric that is available for you to look at and to determine how you know that you're actually doing this in a way that is making a difference. That rubric is called the Continuous Improvement Process Criterion Rubric. It's available on our website or from DPI. Please keep in mind that TSI is an annual identification and that the TSI requires that the SIP be submitted to the LEA, in other words, to central office. It is not required to submit this school improvement plan to DPI. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me, and I will be more than happy to answer your questions. Thank you.